Hello everyone, let's talk about sharpening the saw. If you are coming on this channel, it is likely because you have a business or you have a family business and you are busy and you're having trouble navigating all of those things, not only in your business but also in your personal life. I get it. I've been there. I've had many businesses, several businesses I actually decided to walk away from because they just didn't align with who I wanted to be and the vision of where I was ultimately going, and really it did not align with my purpose as a human being. So this show is for you. If that resonates with you and you just don't have enough time or hours in the day, I get it, and I am going to, I want to pour into you folks because you guys are my tribe. So welcome to the show. Today we're talking about sharpening the saw. One of the things that is one of my tenets is again about elevating, expanding your knowledge, growing your knowledge, and being mindful of your activity and how you're managing your activity. I know in this back in the let's say I think it was back in the 80s when we started coming up with this idea, this concept of time management. You can't manage your time. You just can't. You can't take 20 minutes of time, shove it in a jar, put it up on the shelf, and then use that time later. Time doesn't work that way. But we can manage our energy, and unless and until we start doing that, it just gets really hard. No matter how hard you actually want to read books and educate yourselves and sharpen the saw, you're just not going to be able to do that until you can get a toehold and start working towards that. So for those of you who are still on that journey, this video is for you. It's going to be a short video. Not going to spend a ton of time on it, but one of the best books that I have read is called The Willpower Instinct by Dr. Kelly McGonigal. And this book is really good in a lot of different areas. I know that there's people who talk about Atomic Habits by James Clear. I've got that book over there. That is one of the books I actually managed to get out of my stack of shame, and I actually did read that one. It's a good book, and I think this is a good companion to that. I think it doesn't really matter which one you read first, but I will say that this is probably one of the best books that I have read in terms of actually learning to try to put habits into place and understanding why certain things don't go the way that we want to, no matter how hard we do. So I'm not going to go through. If you notice that when I read, I kind of put all these fancy little tabs on there. Those tabs are for me and my reference because, again, at the end of the day, I'm a strategist, but I'm also a teacher. And I want to help teach you guys as much as I can. So when I'm in the middle of a coaching session and I'm like, hey, wait a minute, and I can reach right over there to my right, grab a book and go, okay, here it is. And I keep them color coded. I keep like all my yellow books near all the other yellow books because it's a lot easier for me to grab them that way. I'll show you sometime. I'll move the camera and show it to you. But right now, I'm not going to do that. So let's just go through this. I'm not going to go through this in any particular order, but I'm just going to kind of go through the tabs here. And these tabs are not really, some of these things are really more for me than they are for anything else. But it's interesting because like right now, and I have a note in here that's called the Dunning-Kruger effect. And the Dunning-Kruger effect is, so it's for people who think they're good at multitasking and they become very distractible. Well, Dunning-Kruger actually, from the way that Dunning-Kruger was actually, there's the way that it was approached was the Dunning-Kruger effect is like we have this knowledge. We when we first learn something, we think we know all there is to know, and then when we realize we don't know what we don't know, it goes into what's called the pit of despair. Right, we're on top of Mount Stupid, and then we go into this valley of despair, and then as time goes on, we kind of realize what we don't know, and then we're learning. we're starting to gain true wisdom. But during that, as we're coming out of that pit of despair, there's real basic struggles that we have, and that's temptation, addiction, distraction, procrastination, all of these problems. And that is why it's really hard for us to rely on our willpower and just say, man, why can't I just press through? Why can't I just muscle through? And one of the biggest takeaways, and if I don't make it now, I'm afraid I won't make it later, but one of the biggest takeaways that I had in this book was how much distraction really plays a role for us in trying to rely on our willpower. And they made the concept as if a willpower was a battery, right? The battery will wear down over time, over the course of a day. And it was interesting that just in one study, there were 227 decisions just about food Can you imagine if we're making 227 decisions on average about food? How many other things are we making decisions on that are far more important than just simply what we eat, right? So it's just really interesting about how much we rely on our willpower, and we're wearing it down like a battery. So there's something in here also related to how important meditation is, and how meditation can really help build not just the willpower battery, but replenish that battery during the day. And they go through on page 26 here. It talks about engaging in meditation, and I didn't engage in meditation very often because I was bad at it. Well, it's like, man, every time I would sit down, I try to quiet my mind, and here comes this chattering monkey in my head and distracting me again. And the point that they made on page 27 was the whole point is being bad at meditation is actually good for our focus. It's interesting. So even a 5-minute meditation, it was pretty interesting that if we did just a simple 5-minute meditation, it actually, you can start to see results as quick as 11 days after that, which I thought was pretty cool. When you start strengthening your meditate, when you're doing the meditations very frequently, how often we actually can start to see the benefits from that. There's an interesting thing on here called heart rate variability, which was a little hard for me to understand at first. I actually had to go through it a couple times to understand. But basically, I kind of wrote a note here that heart rate variability is the measurement of the difference between consecutive beats of your heart. And it also reflects the relationship between your sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So basically, what that means is a decreased heart rate variability is actually not good for you, right? You actually want an increased heart rate variability, which corresponds to a decrease in your heart rate, okay? So what that means is we actually have an ability, when our heart rate variability is high, we actually have a better ability to handle stress and to handle things, and to handle disparity as it comes up, and to handle all this different stuff that comes up in our lives. So, and this is really interesting that people with higher heart rate variability also tend to kick addictions a lot easier. Not easy, but easier. And one of the things that helps with heart rate variability and with increasing heart rate variability is breathing exercises, and of course, like I mentioned earlier, is meditation. So those are a couple things there. Talked about how sleep deprived is actually really causing a lot of distraction issues. That there's like this, especially, and I called it, I kind of nicknamed it an STD. If you have an STD, right? If you're stressed, tired, or distracted, that will tend to lend to not having as much focus. I'm going to move on to, there was something in here that was really fascinating, something called moral licensing. And moral licensing was pretty interesting because it's almost like assigning where things are primarily good or primarily bad about, like saying, oh, I've been good on my diet, so because I've been good on my diet, I can be bad over here, right? Where she was making the point that, okay, well, since I was good on my diet, I can go ahead and cheat on my spouse, right? Now, again, one does not have to have anything at all to do with the other, but she was making the point of saying, hey, this is the danger of attaching moral licensing to things that shouldn't have any particular good or bad attached to it. Like, just because you're good on your diet doesn't mean you can go on a credit card, spending spree, right? Or a shopping spree. So to avoid this trap of attaching something, whether it's primarily good or primarily bad, just approach this as if everything were neutral. But there was one point in here where, and this is kind of where I'm going to land the plane because there's so much to unpack in this book, that there was something here called what these two researchers called the what the hell effect. And it was Janet Polivy and C. Norman Herman. And I believe they were researchers out of the University of Toronto. And they dubbed something called the what the hell effect. And the what the hell effect is, it kind of works like this, where you let's say that let's say you're on a diet, and that diet is, hey, I'm going to do well on my diet. And then all of a sudden you have a chocolate donut. Well, it's because you had the chocolate donut, you're like, well, what the hell? I feel guilty, and now I'm just going to go ahead and eat the whole dozen, right? I'm going to just go lay face down on a buffet table. Well, that's called the what the hell effect. It's like, well, I've indulged and I feel guilty. So now what the hell, I've already blown my diet. What the hell? I may as well go ahead and binge, right? So it's the indulge, regret, and binge, which starts this downward spiral. So they recognized the really interesting thing with this one particular study was they actually did use a group of researchers, a group of dieters, and they took these two separate groups, and they in the one section they actually gave they split them up. Everybody ate a donut, and then in the one group they said, hey, it's totally fine. Everybody cheats on their diet once in a while. Give yourself some grace. You're totally fine. And the next group did not receive that message. So then they sent those two different groups into another room where they could test some candies. I'm going to get the numbers off here a little bit, but you'll get the point, is that the one group that received the messages full of grace actually ate about 20 grams worth of chocolate in that next room. They could test as many as they wanted. The second group, which did not receive any sort of message, giving them grace, they ate almost 3 times more. I think it was 70 grams. I think it was over 3 times more candy. So it was like 70 grams of chocolate. So, or 70 grams of candy. So the point being is that the ones that actually received the grace are actually, it short-circuited the what the hell effect. It short-circuited the regret in that downward spiral. So it's really interesting that how many people and the author did a fantastic job of bringing this up in the book, where many of us, especially as small business owners and operators, that we just feel like we're not hard enough on ourselves. Well, actually, the research shows the opposite. That when we do stumble, when we do fall, that when we approach ourselves with some grace, rather than with this harsh criticism, we actually do better to get back on the bandwagon rather than continue to fall off. So it's really interesting now how all of that work together, how grace plays a role in having a stronger willpower. So there's so much more here in this book, and I don't want to make this video super duper long, but it is, if you have an opportunity to read this book, again, it's called The Willpower Instinct by Dr. Kelly McGonigal. She is an instructor at Stanford University, and apparently it's one of the most popular courses that pretty much at Stanford that is taught. But again, that's probably some of the biggest takeaways that I got from that. But the main thing is that we can't simply rely on our willpower, to try to instill these habits that are going to head us towards a vision of actually where we want to go in our lives. And when we have a vision of where we want to go, and then when we do stumble, that we afford ourselves some grace so we can actually get back on the wagon, and we will and we can continue on rather than just beating ourselves up and treating ourselves poorly. This is actually a much better way to proceed. So that's all I have for today. I hope you did find this helpful. If you want some more resources around stuff like this, for you, the small business entrepreneur or the family business owner operator, and you're looking for more elevation, for more expansion, for more transcendence and transformation in your life, feel free to reach out. Happy to help any way that I can. Have a great rest of your day, guys.